Imagine you're sitting in a packed TV studio. The lights are bright, cameras are rolling, and two Hollywood legends, Will Smith and Keanu Reeves, are sharing the stage. Everyone expects jokes, laughs, and light-hearted banter. And then, Will decides to poke fun at Keanu. A playful jab, just for laughs. The audience bursts out laughing. But Keanu doesn't laugh. He doesn't flinch. He just looks at Will, and says something so calm, so deep, that the entire room falls completely silent. What he said didn't just change the vibe of the show, it went viral around the world. Because in that moment, Keanu didn't just respond. He taught a lesson that people are still talking about today. The studio lights were blinding. Cameras rolled. Laughter echoed across the room. It was supposed to be a typical late-night talk show moment. Fun, casual, and full of banter. Hollywood royalty was in the house. Will Smith, full of charisma and confidence, was sharing the stage with none other than Keanu Reeves, the mysterious and beloved star who had won hearts through roles in The Matrix, John Wick, and more. The audience was excited, the energy electric. Then it happened. Will turned toward Keanu, flashed a playful grin, and delivered what he thought was a harmless jab. "You know, Keanu," he said, voice light but loud enough to grab attention, "you've got that same confused look in every movie, like you just woke up from a nap." The audience burst into laughter. The host chuckled. Even the band played a quick, humorous note. It was the kind of joke that gets clipped, posted on social media, and shared 1,000,000 times. But on that stage, under those lights, something shifted. Keanu didn't laugh. He didn't smirk, brush it off, or fire back with a witty comeback. He simply turned his head and looked at Will. Not with anger. Not with arrogance. Just looked. And that look changed everything. It wasn't just silence that followed. It was tension. A moment of reflection. A breath being held by everyone in the room. Keanu finally spoke. His voice was calm. Unshaken. Almost too quiet for the stage. But that made everyone listen more closely. "You know, I get that a lot," he began, his eyes not blinking, his tone steady. "People think I'm emotionless or blank. But maybe stillness isn't emptiness. Maybe stillness is peace." The laughter died. The crowd shifted in their seats. Some leaned in. Others froze. The energy transformed from entertainment to something deeper, something real. "I've been through a lot in life," Keanu continued. "And sometimes, when you've experienced loss, when you've sat with pain long enough, you don't need to show everything on your face. You just carry it. Quietly." No one interrupted. Will sat back, eyebrows slightly raised, a more serious look replacing the smile from moments before. Keanu wasn't done. "I lost my best friend when I was 23. My daughter was stillborn. The woman I loved died in a car accident shortly after. People see a face and they think it's emotionless. But they don't know what that face has seen." His words hit like a wave. No dramatic flair. No preachy tone. Just truth. Raw and undiluted. He then added, "So maybe, when I look confused, I'm just reflecting. Not on the scene, but on life. Maybe stillness, for me, is the way I honor the people I've lost. The way I stay grounded. The way I keep going." It was no longer a talk show moment. It was a life lesson disguised as a response. Will Smith, a man known for his quick wit and larger-than-life persona, nodded slowly. You could tell he hadn't expected that. No one had. But to his credit, he didn't double down. He didn't try to save the joke or shift the mood. He respected the moment. And so did the audience. What started as a light roast turned into one of the most memorable and authentic exchanges in TV history. Later that night, the clip went viral online. Millions watched and rewatched it, not because it was funny, but because it was real. Something you rarely see in a world of scripted conversations and PR-filtered interviews. People commented things like, "Keanu just taught a masterclass in humility," and "That wasn't a comeback, that was a lesson." Some even said, "Will came with a punchline. Keanu replied with a poem." But the truth is, Keanu wasn't trying to teach anyone. He wasn't trying to win the moment. That's what made it powerful. He was simply being himself, honest, reflective, and grounded. In that single moment, Keanu reminded everyone watching that not all pain is loud. That wisdom doesn't always need volume. And that grace, even when facing a joke at your expense, is the most powerful response of all. He didn't fight back. He didn't defend himself. He just told the truth. And in doing so, he silenced a room full of noise, not with force, but with presence. That's the kind of moment people remember. Not the punchline, but the piece that followed. To understand why this moment was so powerful, you need to understand who Keanu Reeves truly is. He's not like other celebrities. In a world of flashing lights, red carpets, and non-stop headlines, Keanu walks in silence. No loud scandals. No ego-driven feuds. No tabloid drama. No fake smiles forced for the cameras. What you see is what you get, and even that is often only a glimpse into a man who has mastered the art of quiet resilience. Behind his calm, sometimes distant face lies a man who has endured more pain than most of us can begin to comprehend. His life, though wrapped in the shine of Hollywood, has been marked by deep personal tragedies that never make the front page, yet shape the very soul of the man sitting silently across from the camera. At just 23 years old, Keanu lost his best friend, River Phoenix, to a drug overdose. It wasn't just a tragic loss, it was the loss of someone who felt like a brother. They had dreams together, shared laughter, and imagined futures in film that would never come. That kind of pain doesn't go away. It nests itself deep in your spirit, shaping the way you view the world. Years later, Keanu was excited to become a father. But life, once again, dealt him a cruel blow. His daughter, Ava, was stillborn. The grief of losing a child, especially before even getting the chance to hold her, to know her, to hear her laugh, leaves scars that never heal. And if that wasn't enough, just a little over a year later, the love of his life, Jennifer Syme, died in a car accident. One tragedy followed another, as if the universe kept testing just how much one man could take. But Keanu didn't spiral. He didn't turn his sorrow into public outbursts or make headlines with reckless behavior. Instead, he disappeared quietly into himself. He chose humility over attention. In the years that followed, he was often seen riding the subway, giving up his seat without cameras around. He would sit alone on park benches, eat his lunch in peace, and walk through life not as a superstar, but as a human being who had felt the full weight of love, loss, and loneliness. There are stories of him quietly donating millions to children's hospitals. He's known to hand generous bonuses to stunt crews and production teams, the people who rarely get credit but work the hardest. He shows up to set on time, treats everyone with respect, and walks away without demanding the spotlight. He's not interested in being worshipped. He's interested in being decent. So when Will Smith, during a lively interview, made a playful dig about Keanu's famously calm or confused expressions in movies, it wasn't just a joke. To most people, it might have been funny, a bit of banter between two stars. But for Keanu, and for those who truly understood his journey, it poked at something deeper. Not because he was offended, but because it touched on how people often misunderstand silence. They assume that someone who isn't expressive must be empty. That a still face means a still soul. But in Keanu's case, the silence is where the storms have passed. His stillness is not emptiness, it's control, it's reflection, it's depth. When Keanu finally responded, he didn't snap. He didn't fire back. He simply said, "Maybe stillness isn't emptiness. Maybe stillness is peace." That single line wasn't just a comeback, it was a reflection of his entire life philosophy. It wasn't pride that fueled those words. It was wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only comes from walking through fire and emerging on the other side with your soul intact. He wasn't trying to impress the audience. He wasn't trying to win the moment. He was just being honest. And that honesty cut through the noise of the stage, the laughter, the cameras. It went straight to the heart. People didn't just hear Keanu. They felt him. In those few quiet words, he reminded the world that depth doesn't always come with noise, and that strength doesn't always show up with fists clenched or voices raised. Keanu has lived his life carrying invisible weights. And yet, he chooses kindness. He chooses humility. He chooses stillness. Not because he has nothing to say, but because what he says, when he does speak, matters. In that moment, as Will Smith looked back at him, something changed. A lesson was taught without a lecture. A truth was delivered without anger. And the entire room, and later the entire internet, paused to listen to a man who rarely speaks, but when he does, he leaves the world speechless. Keanu looked at Will with a slight smile, the kind that holds more stories than words ever could. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't defensive. They were understanding, almost forgiving. Then he said, with a calm voice that gently cut through the noise, "You know, I get that a lot. People think I'm emotionless or blank. But maybe stillness isn't emptiness. Maybe stillness is peace." That one sentence changed everything. The mood in the studio, once buzzing with laughter and energy, suddenly shifted. It was like someone had dimmed the volume on the entire room. Will blinked, the smile on his face fading as he processed the unexpected depth of Keanu's response. The audience, who had been chuckling along just moments ago, fell quiet. Phones stopped recording. No one wanted to miss a word. And Keanu, unbothered by the weight of the moment, kept going. "Sometimes, people laugh at things they don't understand," he continued. His tone wasn't bitter. It wasn't meant to scold. It was observational, thoughtful, like he was explaining something he'd made peace with long ago. "I've spent a lot of time alone. I've lost people I love. I've found meaning not in showing emotion, but in understanding it." Those words didn't come from a script. They came from experience. From years of walking quietly through pain, from moments of grief that left no room for performance. Keanu wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to turn the moment around or earn applause. He was simply telling the truth. He turned slightly toward the audience, his voice steady, his presence calm but commanding. "We don't always have to be loud to be strong. And not every face that's calm is clueless. Sometimes it's just calm." The room, filled with people who came to laugh and be entertained, now found themselves caught in something far deeper. There were no more laughs. No more casual banter. Only respect. A heavy kind of silence settled over the space, not awkward, but profound. It was the kind of silence that follows truth. Not the kind that's forced, but the kind that people willingly give when they know they've heard something important. Keanu had just flipped the script. What began as a playful jab turned into a conversation about strength, grief, and perception. In just a few lines, he dismantled the assumption that quietness equals weakness. That someone who doesn't wear their emotions on their sleeve must not feel them at all. He showed that there's power in restraint. That sometimes, the calmest person in the room is the one who has survived the most storms. Will Smith, to his credit, didn't interrupt. He didn't try to shift the moment back into humor or cover the silence with another joke. He sat there, nodding slightly, visibly taken aback. Not in a bad way, but in the way a student looks at a teacher who just said something that changed how they see the world. What Keanu did in that moment wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. But it commanded it. Because truth has a way of doing that. It doesn't need to yell. It doesn't need a spotlight. It just is. And when spoken by someone who has lived it, it resonates in ways that scripted words never could. The audience didn't cheer. Not yet. They were still holding onto the weight of what had just been said. Some nodded. Others lowered their gaze. Everyone, for that moment, was united, not by entertainment, but by a shared understanding of something deeper. Something human. In the days that followed, the clip spread like wildfire online. Not because it was funny. Not because it was dramatic. But because it was real. People replayed it over and over, not to laugh, but to feel. Comment sections filled up with reflections. Viewers shared their own experiences of being misunderstood, of being the quiet one, the calm one, the one others called emotionless. And for many of them, Keanu's words were the first time they felt seen. What Keanu gave the world in that interview wasn't just a great moment of television. He gave us permission to be still. To not always perform. To not always react. He reminded us that behind every calm face might be a lifetime of stories, a well of emotion, and a heart that has been broken and rebuilt more times than anyone knows. And that maybe, just maybe, stillness is peace. After that moment, Will Smith sat back for a second, clearly taken aback. Then, almost instinctively, he leaned forward, nodding slowly, a new respect forming on his face. He looked Keanu in the eye and said, Man, that's deep. I was just messing around, but you just took us to a whole other level. It wasn't just a line, it was genuine. You could see it in his posture, hear it in his voice. The energy between them had shifted completely. This wasn't a celebrity roast anymore. This was a real conversation between two men who had lived very different lives but, in that moment, found a strange, silent common ground. From that point on, the rest of the interview felt different. The jokes quieted. The studio lights didn't seem as harsh. Even the audience stopped waiting for punchlines and leaned in to listen. Will and Keanu began talking about deeper things: loss, grief, the strange loneliness that can come with fame. Will opened up about his own experiences, about how the pressure of always having to be on had left him feeling hollow at times. Keanu, in his calm way, nodded, understanding more than most ever could. They spoke about success, not the glamorous, red carpet kind, but the kind that has nothing to do with money or fame. The kind where you wake up and still have the strength to try again, even when everything inside you feels broken. Keanu shared how he measures success not by roles or awards, but by the moments of kindness he can give others. A word, a gesture, even silence, those things, he said, matter more than most people think. Even the host, usually the one keeping the jokes rolling, sat unusually still. He looked stunned, not because of anything dramatic, but because it was rare to witness something so raw and authentic on a stage built for performance. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't rehearsed. It was just real. And in a world where so much feels artificial, real has become something sacred. Later, after the show aired, the clip exploded across the internet. It made its way to YouTube first, where millions watched it within hours. Then it flooded TikTok and Instagram, chopped into short clips that captured the exact moment the room fell silent. But no matter how short the video was, it hit people hard. It wasn't just viral, it was felt. The comment sections were overflowing. Strangers from all corners of the world wrote things like, "Keanu is a different kind of human." Others said, "That wasn't a comeback. That was a masterclass in grace." One comment, which quickly rose to the top, read, "Will came with jokes. Keanu came with wisdom." And they were right. Keanu didn't clap back with sarcasm. He didn't try to out-joke Will or turn the moment into a spectacle. He didn't even raise his voice. He just told the truth. In a way that was so simple, so honest, it stopped everyone in their tracks. He didn't try to win. He wasn't playing a game. He was being himself, a man who has walked through the fire and come out the other side with a deeper understanding of life. That hit harder than any punchline ever could. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do in a world addicted to noise is be quiet. Sometimes, the greatest strength isn't in how loud you can be, but in how calm you can stay. Keanu showed that grace is louder than mockery. That stillness can speak volumes. That wisdom, when delivered with humility, doesn't need applause to matter. In the end, the moment became more than just a viral clip. It became a reminder that behind every face, every actor, every person you see, there's a story. One you might not understand. One you might never know. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth looking past the surface before you laugh. Because beneath that calm expression might be someone who survived things you couldn't imagine, and chose, despite it all, to respond with kindness. And that's something worth remembering. In a world where everyone is racing to be the loudest in the room, where attention is currency and going viral is the goal, Keanu Reeves quietly reminded us of something we've almost forgotten. Real strength doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to shine under a spotlight or come wrapped in humor. Sometimes it walks into a room quietly, sits down, listens, and then when it speaks, it changes everything. Keanu could have played along with the joke. He could have tossed a witty line back at Will Smith and gotten a big laugh. He could have made a joke at Will's expense or turned the moment into a viral battle of wit. Instead, he did something far braver. He chose truth. A truth shaped by pain, maturity, and experience, not meant to one-up, but to share. And that's what made the moment unforgettable. He didn't react with ego. He didn't get defensive. He didn't try to win. He simply told the truth in the most disarming, human way possible. And in that simple response, he taught millions something far more powerful than any viral meme could. He showed that you don't have to fight fire with fire. That just because someone throws a jab doesn't mean you have to throw one back. That you can speak truth with grace, without raising your voice. That sometimes, silence, especially the kind that follows honesty, is louder than shouting ever could be. It was a moment that peeled back the layers of Hollywood polish and gave us something rare: authenticity. Something that's become increasingly scarce in a world where people often perform more than they live. In those few seconds, Keanu wasn't playing a role. He wasn't promoting a film or trying to look good for the cameras. He was just being himself, raw, grounded, and wise. And to Will Smith's credit, he didn't double down or laugh it off. He felt the weight of Keanu's words. You could see it in the way he leaned forward, nodded, and shifted from performer to person. Later, he posted on social media, "Respect to Keanu. That brother's on another level." It wasn't just a throwaway line. It was an acknowledgement that what had happened wasn't just television. It was real. It was rare. And it mattered. The clip that followed wasn't just another gotcha moment. It didn't trend because of controversy or conflict. It trended because it showed something we're all hungry for: humanity. The kind that doesn't need filters or edits. The kind that reminds us what respect looks like. What grace sounds like. What wisdom feels like. People across the internet shared their own reactions, not because they were entertained, but because they were moved. They wrote about how Keanu made them feel seen. How his calmness reminded them of their own quiet struggles. How his refusal to play along with surface-level jokes gave them permission to stop pretending too. In an industry built on image, Keanu continues to be the exception. He's known not just for the characters he plays, but for the way he carries himself in real life. The generosity he shows to crew members. The humility he brings to interviews. The stillness he brings into chaotic rooms. That's what people remember. That's why he stands out. This wasn't just a viral clip. It was a lesson. A moment of still water in a sea of noise. A reminder that not all heroes wear capes, and some just sit quietly, speak thoughtfully, and leave you thinking long after the cameras stop rolling. Keanu Reeves didn't win a debate that day. He didn't try to. But what he did do was win respect, not by demanding it, but by deserving it. And that's why he continues to be one of the most admired and respected figures in Hollywood, not just because of what he does on screen, but because of who he is when no one's watching. And in a world obsessed with going viral, Keanu showed us what it means to go deep. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that real strength doesn't need to be loud, then do one simple thing. Hit that like button to show some love for the quiet power of grace. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Keanu's message today. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw, and inspiring stories that go beyond the surface. Because sometimes, the quietest voices leave the loudest impact. See you in the next story.